I'll be able to read it out for you.
Okay, so I believe that I'm recording now. Hi everybody, my name is Grimwolf. I'm a Laurel from the Kingdom of Callantyr, and I'm not normally a digital artist. As far as I've been playing around with 3D modeling for a few years now, but only a few months before the pandemic, and we are currently in a pandemic, which is why we're all doing the Zoomy Zoom thing. I did decide that I wanted to get into making a bunch of vector-based line art, not only for my own personal benefit, but also for my students, because I teach chasing and repoussé, and that requires a lot of layout. So this lets me design things in such a way that I can infinitely scale it, large or small. And I'm only limited by the projector or the printer that I have as far as what kind of resolution that I can get, because it's all mathematically based, vector as opposed to raster. So most people who are going to get something out of this will be doing graphic design, logos, or other kind of heraldic art. The class is severely aimed towards the SCA, but I did pick a design that is going to be fairly friendly to anyone and everyone. So without too much ado, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And I'm just going to share the whole dang thing so that everyone can see what I'm all about.
Fabulous.
So I asked everyone to visit my site, which is going to be sledgehamster.com/download/Saturday morning cartoons. And that has everything that we need to follow along. We have the compass rose, that's most of what I'll be teaching today. There's a dirt print that I used as a design, made a tracery of it. And here I have the superimposition of both of them together. And then this is what I do, is chasing and repoussé. And so this medallion is 2 inches or 50 millimeters across. And this is my little pudgy hand. And so here's what the final piece looks like, more or less. There's a fibula on the back for attachment, all that good stuff. Here are all the files, and you can find them at sledgehamster.com/download/Saturday morning cartoons. If you go to just, that's going to be, let's grab that and backspace. And if you notice at the back of my screen, or at the bottom of my screen rather, I have installed a program called Karnak, which is going to show what my keystrokes are. So if I ever forget to say things, it should let you know, going to the downloads, it should let you know what I'm doing when you go through the video and pause it and say, what are you talking about? I believe it's the very first one is Saturday morning cartoons, but then I also have about 5 different kingdoms worth of images. I'm currently teaching in the Kingdom of Meridies. So if I click here, I have all kinds of badges for the Kingdom of Meridies that are all in the vectors that we'll be doing. Plus I have these kind of flash sheets that can be printed out on size to make 2-inch diameter award badges, medals, or pilgrimage badges, or whatever you want them to be. So we are done with that. Everyone at this point has downloaded Inkscape. I have erased my old copy because I found out that I had a bunch of legacy tools that I didn't realize had been remembered. So I've started off with a fresh build so that in as much as possible, I'm going to show you exactly what you'll see with a brand new build of Inkscape. So if I hit Shift and run my mouse wheel, I can pan left and right and up and down. Control will let me zoom in and out, again with the mouse wheel, and I'm surprised it doesn't show the clicks. Clicking the mouse wheel will drag it so that I can pan it to place it in different places. So I'll control zoom in a little bit here, and with the middle mouse wheel to grab, place my document. And so this illustrates a standard 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that most people are going to use. And we'll begin from there. Currently, I have absolutely nothing here. So I will go to File. Let's go to File Import, which is Control-I, which I never use the keystrokes. The last thing I used was my class follow along folder. So you want to find wherever you downloaded any of these images. The only ones we'll really be using in the class today are the Compass Rose 50% and the Drew Pelican 50%, but we'll be spending most of our time here. And when I open that, it's just going to put itself in a random place. And I never know where it's going to go, but it is clearly nowhere near my page. And so if I were to take a screenshot of this, it would only save this corner of it. You can see here that if I click off of that, this is my object. When I click on it, it shows me all these arrows in this dotted line. That's how I know it's selected. If I left click, I can drag it around, and that'll get me close, but it won't get me as close as I want to. So I'm going to go to Object up here at the top, and I am going to realize just how much I'm used to having everything docked on the side. How hilarious. Was it Path? No, it's got to be Object. Object Properties. Object Properties is not the thing that I was looking for. Hilarious. Let's go ahead and add a layer from Layer and add a layer. And we're going to call this one Background Image. Enter. And I was really hoping close that doc. Shift Control L. Okay, there. Okay, so I do have to at some point hit Shift Control L if I want it to dock. So that's good. So now I have my layer 1 and my background image. So currently, both layers are unlocked. There's a little padlock icon that if I click on it, it will lock, and there's a visibility. This is currently layer 1, so if I hit the little eye, I can't see it anymore, and I can't grab anything because there's nothing to grab. So if I do come over here to my Select and Transform Objects button, S, Shift S, nope. Well, that's, or maybe because I was already there. No. All right, like I said, I don't use hotkeys. So I come over here and I use my Select and Transform Objects, and I'll do a grab, Control Z. I was on circles. And I'll grab my image. And so then I will edit and cut, switch layers to my background image layer, and edit. I've got two options, paste or paste in place. I'm just going to paste, and it'll throw it here in the corner of my document, my workspace. So the object is still selected by these dotted lines. We can see that. At this point is where I will go to Object and Align and Distribute. So it looks like I will have to do Shift Control A if I want that to dock. All right, well, looks like maybe I have to do the hotkey to get it to show at some point, but then once I have it here, it will stay here forever, which is great. And that's what I'm used to having it, is just being able to scroll down through my little docked selections And so that's nice to know that once we change these properties, they'll be there forever until you delete the program. So the default is relative to last selected. I want to change that to relative to page. So now when this object is selected, and I can still drag it, I can still drag it with my mouse. If I come to this first option, that's the third here, that says center on vertical axis, and I click that, boom, it snaps it to the center of the page. If I had left it on relative to last selected, it would have gone to whatever my last thing was, which is never what I want. The one underneath vertical is horizontal, center on horizontal axis, click on that. Because the object is selected, it performed that action. If I were to move this, click off of it and hit the horizontal, it doesn't do anything because nothing is selected. So that and that. Now this is centered to the relative size of the page. To keep myself out of trouble, the next thing I'll do is lock down my background image so I don't get in trouble. I'll click on layer 1, and there's one button here that says raise the current level to the top and raise the current layer. So I'll either move 1 or I'll move as many steps as possible to get my current layer wherever it is. So at this point, either one of them would do the same thing because I only have 2 layers. So I'll raise the current layer, and this one I'm going to call, I either have to double left click on it or right click on it. I'll right click and rename the layer. And I want this to be outside circle, enter, or return. So at this point, I have a name for my layer. My layer is selected. I want to come over here to create circles, ellipses, and arcs, which is E. And I'm going to left click and drag just a random shape. Your shape should not look like this, so don't worry. I don't know why I remembered it like this. It's kind of aggravating, but this will correct itself soon. If I hit shift, it will snap to one axis that I'm moving closest to, either X or Z, sort of. If I hit shift control and drag on the diagonal, it will have a more regular geometric shape. So that will give me a more true circle. At this point, I have to kind of drag this around to describe the entire circle. And maybe, oh, I didn't quite make it. There it is. Come on, circle, act like a circle. I'm not entirely certain why it is that's behaving that way. Wow. That won't really get in my way for what we're doing because it's going to be virtually invisible. You might have a circle that is full of color and not what I have, in which case, if we go to object, should be fill stroke. I'm not used to having to look over here. Fill and stroke, there it is, the very first one. Shift Control F. Okay. Shift Control F. There is my doc that I was looking for. So fill is the default. If I hit an X, no paint, that should have cleared out whatever color you had. If I go to stroke paint, the default's going to be black, and I'll leave it at the default for right now. And if I go to stroke style, it looks like right now it might be saying 1 millimeter. I want to change that to 2 millimeters. enter, and so that changes. It did update, but it might not be evident. We'll come back to that in just a moment, because what I want to do now is now I can go back to my align and distribute, which I have docked here, Shift Control A, and I can center it on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis. And now this is the center of the world. If I move back to my select and transform objects S, here I can change the proportions of my circle. Hitting Shift will lock it to one axis or another. Shift Control and a diagonal will let me change the size, but that's not what I'm doing right now. I just wanted to select it. And I'm going to go back over here to Object and Transform, Shift Control M. But I wanted to make sure that everyone had, okay, Shift Control M it is. There it is. What I want to do is not move, even though that's the default. I want to go to scale. It starts off as a percentage. I'm an American, so I'll go with inches. And you see that it has changed the number because it went from percent to inches. So it knows how big the page is and how big the circle is. And so if I scale proportionally with this mark here, and I'll type in 8, enter, that immediately fills in the height there because I'm asking it because it's a circular circle. That's great. I hit apply. Boom, there it is. Control pan mouse wheel will let me zoom in. So at this point, if I go back to my fill and stroke, and now you can see the width is 0.65 millimeters. Now if I go back and tell that to be 2, enter, there it's much more visible how much that line has thickened up in a way that it's going to be a lot easier to see things. So I'm going to lock down my outside circle layer, and I can either right click here on any one of them to add a layer, and the default will add it above, or I can come here to this to create a new layer, this little plus sign here, click on that, and now I have, it wants it to become above the current, and it wants to call it outside circle 1. That's not what I want to call it. I want to call it crosshairs. And I will add that layer. And so now I have that layer has become the active layer. My other two are still locked down. I still have full visibility of everything. What I want to do here is create a rectangle or square. And for right now, I'm not concerned about the size of the square or the rectangle. I'm just going to drag and create a rectangle. It doesn't matter what the proportions are. If we need to go to fill and stroke and put the fill as no paint and the stroke, I'm going to make it red. 255 red. I can also type in 255. That'll make it 100% red. And I am going to create a second line that is a Bezier curve or a straight line B. I'm going to do a straight line. So I click on the Bezier curve tool. And when I hover towards a corner, I will get this little mouse over that says handle to corner. When I see the handle to corner and the little X under my cursor, I'll left click on that. And now I have a little red square and a little red tail that will follow my mouse cursor. And so I can either take it to this corner or that corner, and it doesn't matter which. I'll take it to the top corner, and well, I won't. I'll take it to the bottom corner because there I can see where it says handle to corner. When it says handle to corner, I'll left click, and then now it's created that line. It usually defaults to green, but it's turned to yellow because it knows, even if other people aren't heraldically minded, that a color on color is not going to show up that well. So it's not going to put green on red. It's going to put kind of a yellow on the red. I can either right click or hit return or enter. and that will finish that line. If I come back up here to my select tool and click on my square and then hit delete, gets rid of it. But now I have this perfectly straight line that isn't at a weird angle because you just can't lay axial correct lines in Inkscape without having some kind of a geometry to follow. So I'll stay in my select tool, I'll grab this. Now it's selected and we see that I can change the length of it. I can change the position of it. And what I want to do is go back to align and distribute with it being relative to page and center it on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis. So now that shows where the center of my circle is because they're both relative to the center of the page. I'm going to control mouse wheel in to kind of zoom in on this. And if I hit shift and grab this left-hand arrow or whichever arrow you have, it's now going to stretch equidistantly from both sides. And so if I move that, I like to move it to the center of the circle, just for the sake of argument. With this like that, what I want to do is go to transform. I'll leave scale proportionally on. I want to change the width to 8 inches, apply. When I zoom back in, it's moved a little bit farther, and I believe that has to do with my stroke. But we can see that they're both on the same axis of this circle. So here I can hit shift and drag to the corner, drag it to the center, and that should be close to the center of my line. And if I zoom out and zoom over here, I can verify. If I'm not entirely certain that I didn't screw something up, I can always go back to align and distribute, hit center on vertical axis. Nothing changed. This is still the active object, so it is in the exact center of the page. That's exactly what I want. I'll control mouse wheel out to zoom out, so now I can see everything that I'm working on. Just to make this a little bit more visible, I'll go to my fill and stroke menu. I'll go to my stroke paint. And here's where I am turning it red, 255. And I'll go to my stroke style and I'll type in 2 for 2 millimeters. And so now I've got a really bold line. Here I can go to edit, copy, edit, paste. And this is using the same sort of controls we're used to seeing from any kind of word program. So Control C and Control V, but I don't like using the hotkeys personally because then that takes my fingers off of the mouse and kind of disturbs my workflow. If I paste in place, it'll paste it directly on top of that. And now if I go to transform Control Shift M and move from scale to rotate and type in 90 and enter, nothing has happened because I haven't hit apply yet. All I've done is let it know that 90 was the number that I wanted in this instance. And so that gave the input, because otherwise, until I had 90 typed in, it wouldn't accept it. So if I apply, it turns 90 degrees, and now I have this crosshairs here that is exactly what I wanted. I can shift, left click, and that will choose both of them. And I can go to Object, Group, Control G. Now, those two, if I am in Select, are one object that will move around wherever I want. I can hit Control Z to go back, or I can go to Align and Distribute, Center, Center, vertical and horizontal, and now it's right in the center of where I want it to be. At this point, what I want are my diagonal lines, and don't worry that the images aren't syncing up. What we're going to be doing is completely redrawing the background image in Inkscape with vectors so that we can scale it infinitely. So I will go ahead while this is selected and edit copy. I will create a new layer, and I don't want it to be crosshairs. I want it to be, I'll call it diagonal. Diagonal X. That sounds pretty cool. I'll call it diagonal X green, so I remember which one it is. With diagonal X green active, I can go to edit and paste in place, but it can't see it because I haven't done anything to it yet. I will want to go to my transform, rotate 45, apply, and now it's turned it because I pasted it in place. It looked exactly the same. Now that's rotated 45 degrees. It looks different, but that's going to confuse me, and I will forget which one is which. So I'll go back to my fill and stroke, go to my stroke paint. Paint is undefined, so let's say a color, and I'll say I want my green to be 255, but that's yellow, so I'll take my red, pull it all the way down, and that still looks like kind of a Kelly green. I don't know. I want more of a heraldic green, so it looks like 180 is about what I'd like. Don't worry about the numbers, but know that you can slide it anywhere in these ranges. And then you can also have a fade if you really want it, but I don't worry about that at this point. Go to the stroke style and change it to 2. That'll make it a little bit bolder, and that's pretty good. At this point, I can lock down my crosshairs. Well, let's say that I don't lock down my crosshairs and I come over here and select. If I click on this, I can still grab it. Control Z, and I can grab this, Control Z, and I can shift left click, and now I've got both of them. Control Z. So if I wanted to, I could edit, copy, create a new layer, and call this Tiny 8 Blue. And if you want different names, I won't hold it against you because I'm coming up with silly names. Edit and paste in place. And if I go to my stroke paint and say I want that to be blue 100 and no green, Control Z, because I still had all the, no, that's okay. We'll do the blue, we'll do the green, and then Control Shift and this handle arrow here, and now they'll all shrink at the same rate. However, I'm going to have to come back to this. At this point, I'm going to lock down all the layers that I have visible so I don't confuse myself. And I'll come down to my background image and I'll unlock that. I'll take a drink of water because I'm lecturing, straighten my mustache. And at this point in the background image, I'll have to make sure that I have selected, click on it, and now I get my dotted lines and my handling corners and all that good stuff. Zooming in and out. I'll go back to my transform and I'll go to move, and I'm going to put my vertical as 5, enter, and if I click apply, it will move 5 millimeters down in vertical. I'm not used to these coordinates. So fine, -5, apply, 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 apply. until I start getting really close. And then I can control mouse wheel in to get a little bit closer and change this down to maybe -1, because this is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is you grab an image off the internet, and then you are going to need to place it somewhere that you will have an idea of where the geographic center of it will be if you want any kind of geometric construction. And this will just make your life easier if you know how to reposition an image so that you can get it close to what you want to do. I'm going to change this to -0.25 and apply that, apply that, apply that. And at that point, I'm going to say that's really dang close. And any more than that is going to be visually and virtually indistinct. Since I'm still using my background image, Control Shift and the corner arrow, I'm going to drag this in such a way that my gray line appears to be in the center of my black line. And if I have to, I can come here to this raise the current layer to the top. And that made everything invisible because this is not a vector yet. So we'll put it back at the bottom where it belongs. And we'll think that that's probably pretty close. And if it's within the thickness of the line, we can always come down here to the outside circle, fill in stroke, stroke style, click on the circle to select it, 0.25, and now we really know where we are. Lock down the outside circle, pick up the background image, select the background image, and we still need to come down to our corner, and I'll show you why in just a moment. So that's as close as we're going to get. If I zoom out and come to a side arrow and hit Shift, it's going to stretch it along that axis. Control Z, Shift there. So I don't usually like to use those. Okay, we can Control Shift, and that does, that's not proportionally scaling it the way I want, because you can see that it's getting way off of my circle. So that's the way to go for concentric circles, or so I thought. The important thing is that these circles are more or less where we want them to be. We are using true vectors, and everything is going to come out geometrically solid. So I can lock down my background image, unlock my outer circle, click on the circle, change that back to 2 millimeters, enter, and now I've got some solid geometry to deal with. I want to, at this point, create a new layer that I'm going to call Blue Circle Guide, just so I know that eventually I'm going to get rid of that. It's put it just above where the outside circle is. I'll lock down the outside circle so I don't mess myself up. No, I won't. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the outside circle. I'm going to click on that outside circle. I'm going to edit, copy, edit, paste in place. Then with Shift Control, I'm going to scale it all the way down to where it visually appears to intersect with these 8 points. I'll zoom in just so I can get extra fiddly with it. Control Shift, grab that point to where it looks like it overlaps with my vertices here. Then I can lock down outside circle and blue circle guide, come back to my tiny 8 blue, unlock that, click that, and now when I Control Shift corner drag, Control Z, Shift because I never grouped those. I didn't group those that whole time that I had those. So object group, unless I have everything selected, it will move at different rates. But when it's grouped, they'll all move together. Earlier, I had my red X and my green X copied and changed the colors, but I hadn't grouped them. So that's something that you will find vexing if you don't know what is going on. So with those all as one group, where now I have this X that I can move around, Control Z to put it back, Shift Control and corner arrow to line that up to where I think it should intersect with that line. And that gives me what needs to go there. I will transform Control Shift M to rotate. Half of 45 is 22.5. Apply. Why did that not apply? There it is. Okay. So even though it doesn't quite match up with the image behind, the important thing is that it is true to the geometry that is currently there. If we are in any doubt, align and distribute, vertical and horizontal, it didn't move a bit. So the vectors are correct. The guideline was only close. So at this point, we have all these different colors that are completely different from one another. And if I were to go to fill and stroke and change that to 2 millimeters, then everything would be of the same line weight. I can lock that down. And now I have all the geometry necessary to get started on my star. The great thing here is all of these reference points they're going to be more than reference points. So I'll create yet another layer, and this one I'm going to call compass rose. And that's what's going to be our final piece, as it were. Come back to my Bezier curves. I'll keep compass rose unlocked. I'll make sure everything else is locked because I don't want to accidentally add lines on my background. But when you see that the tip of this nib, this little ink pen, has a little X that's its own little reticle, and when I get the X to the corner, there's our handle to cusp node that shows up. When I left click there, and that's active, it will snap to that point, and then I can drag down, and I just get close to it, and you can see it pulls. And if you experiment with a little bit, it's a little rubber band effect, and it will physically pull the cursor away from you to snap it to that node. Left click for there, and it's now anchored there. Aha. So I got a little bit ahead of myself. That's okay. Nothing is lost. If I hit enter, those lines are saved. And if my stroke style is still active and I type in 2, I've got a good black line that will stay there. And we'll lock this for just a moment. We'll come down to our diagonal X green, which is super easy to find because I named it what it looks like. And I select it, and I can see that the whole thing is selected. Control Shift and the corner arrow to get that close. I'll zoom in. That's close enough for me. If I want to fine tweak it, hooray. Good job, me. I can then lock down diagonal X green, and you see that nothing is selected anymore. So I didn't have to unselect it. I can't select anything because it's locked. I've got every layer locked down. So if I come back to my compass rose and unlock it, select my Bezier tool and zoom in a little bit and just get close to this, So I don't want to engage that yet. What I want to do is use my edit paths by nodes. I was hoping it would show up. If I then click on this object, I get a red line showing where my object is. And if I left click on that, you see now that it has a little node here and it has a little node here where the ends of the lines are. And I can grab that with the edit node and left click, and I can move this all around anywhere I want. I can even put it on top of itself and then it disappears, Control Z. But the good thing about this is I can come over here to my draw calligraphic, or no, I don't want that. I want my Bezier curves, damn it. I'm going to click my Bezier curves and it will snap to the custom node, handle to custom node, and then I have a little red arrow. When I click on that, you'll see here in just a minute when I look for the handle to custom node and I click and hit enter, it updates this line. And so I don't have to change the stroke of the line because it has continued this line. If I go back to the edit path by nodes and click on this, it's all one object now. And so I can move this around. It only, well, Control Z, if I click somewhere off of it and then click on a node, it'll only pick up the node that I clicked on. Otherwise, if I still had this one active, you saw how this one and that one stayed in the same relationship to one another. And then I was moving those with that as the anchor point.
You have 10 minutes left.
All right.
Offer questions.
Oh, I have 10 minutes left. I'd better get cracking then. So I will go back to my Bezier curves and complete this out. Handle the custom node, click, 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 enter. That gives me a quarter of my star. If I then come over and hide all of my other layers, crosshair, blue circle, I'll leave the outer circle because that's fine. Then if I come back to compass rose, select and click on my object, I can edit copy and edit paste. And I have a copy of this. I can go to object, rotate 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, it doesn't matter. Click it and grab it, and it still remembers those nodes. And so custom node to custom node, it locks in. Edit, let's copy that and paste that. So now it's got this one. Aha, my face is hiding it. But as long as I use the same rotate 90 degrees clockwise, it will remember that. I could also Control Z, edit cut. I could also select that, shift select that, object, group, and then edit, copy, edit. We could do paste in place. And object, flip horizontal, H. And as long as I've selected it, then I can snap that there, and now it's, well, that's interesting. Aha, there was another, I Control Z a few times because there was something that it snapped to that was not what I wanted. Copy, paste, object, rotate 90 degrees. I was not paying enough attention and it snapped to something else that was not cusp to node. So there's a lot of things that will look like they're really close, but they won't be. And it's not always a problem until it is. So I want you to be aware that there will be two options. As far as rotating your objects, there is cusp node to cusp node, and there was another one that wasn't quite matching up. Rotate rotate. All right, that one is now symmetrical. Everything is lined up. We have all of our lines. We can use this guideline now. This is our compass rose. If we use our Bezier curves and straight lines,
I have
Good.
minutes.
thank you, control mouse wheel. Here's where we start getting to the curved lines. You can click anywhere, somewhere near there, and it'll still handle the cusp node. If you click at that point and then drag, you can see this toggle that I have. It will let me adjust the curve. And so I'll put it someplace that I don't want it. And then you can see that it's trying to give the opposite effect here. I can hit enter or right click and it completes that line. And then when I edit as a node and click on it, I can then grab this little tail here and slide it around to where it snaps out in place. I know that one's in place. If I zoom in on this one, I can grab it and fine tune it wherever I think it should be. And if I still think that looks better, right click, escape, there we go. I can go to my stroke style, 2, and now I have the same line weight, and now it'll look like the compass rose is on top of this circle. I can edit copy, edit paste, object, flip horizontal H, grab it, because if I just move the node, it'll just pull it around like taffy. So at that point, I have two shapes that are bilaterally symmetrical, left to right. Shift click will group them. Well, it'll select them. I need to go to object group to group them. Otherwise, they'll rotate independently. I can edit, copy, edit, paste.
3 minutes.
Object, flip vertical, and I can snap it in place here. Cusp node to cusp node, shift select, object group, and now I have those both grouped. From here I can copy, paste in place, and then when I do object rotate 90 degrees, it fills in my circle for me because of how that shape is, Control Z.
I have to stop. We've got 2 minutes.
So I think that this was the first half of the class. It is a 2-hour class.
Oh, I thought they told you it was 1.
Runa,
Yes,
are you, okay. So the
Yeah.
class is going for another hour, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, good.
We got an extra hour because we had somebody drop out. So.
Hooray for somebody else dropping out that wasn't me. Honestly, it doesn't matter if we leave these as separate objects or not, because of how I'm going to approach this. But now we have something that looks an awful lot like the compass rose. And if I come down here to my I thought it was the blue circle guide. Oh, I think that might still be on my outside circle. It is. That's still on my outside circle layer. So I can make sure I'll lock down my compass rose for now and come back down to my outside circle, unlock it, select just the inner circle. I was intending on having this on a separate layer that I could just hide later, but I don't need it at all. It did its job. I can cut it and I'll not regret it and I won't miss it. We will eventually need these lines. even though they had just been guidelines. If we wanted to, I'll lock down my outside circle. And if I come back to my compass rose and unlock it, I could, with the Bezier tool, because I have the nodes, snap lines from there to there, but I can't because I didn't select it. I'm still on my outside circle trying to draw on things, but the outside circle is locked. So I can't draw anything because I had the wrong layer selected. So I need to select compass rose. I can lock and unlock and toggle visibility on and off without making it the active layer. And so that's why I religiously lock down everything when I'm not using it, because otherwise I will end up on things where I don't intend them to be. And then when I dutifully delete one of my layers, I find out that I just got rid of half of my work because I had half of my lines on my background image or something silly like that. But with Compass Rose active and the Bezier curve tool, I can click here and here, and then I get a line. And so it will be able to use those nodes to create new geometry. Control Z a couple times, but I don't need those in this instance because I already have all of these lines that are all the lines that I want, except for the tiny 8 blue. I don't want that. But what I can do is take my diagonal X screen and unlock that, and my crosshairs and unlock that. And no, I do want the tiny 8 blue. I take it back. I do want that. I'll lock down Compass Rose. And so with all of those, I'll select all of them in a drag select, and now it's got all of them. If I move, it will move all of them. Control Z. I'll go to Object and Group, and now they're all one thing. I can go to my stroke paint. I can say that I do want a color. It defaults to black. And if I want to say that my stroke style should be 1.5, or honestly 1, I think does look kind of nice, having a thinner stroke for the compass, but it doesn't really matter, especially if you're doing this for layout. At that point, I like to keep all the lines the same thickness. But if you are going for more graphic art, then maybe changing the strokes individually is something that you're into. I can edit cut, and I can unlock the Compass Rose, edit, paste in place, making sure that I had that layer active. And now when I go to my diagonal layers, none of them are doing anything anymore because there isn't anything to see or be seen. So that's great. I just got rid of about 4 layers there. And if I come up here and hide my Compass Rose, all I have is this outer circle. So that can be really helpful when you're doing your designing to tell where things are and where they're not. So at that point, I could take the outside circle and drop it down onto the Compass Rose, or something that I haven't shown yet, which I normally would show, is let's lock down the Compass Rose and go to the outside circle, select it so that it does something. And I have a couple sliders here. I have an opacity here for the object selected, and I have an opacity here for everything on the layer. So I can either type in or drag. I'll put it somewhere around 50. So now I've got this gray line. If I zoom in, we can see kind of a ghost of where it is. That's how I normally do my process is I will put some guidelines down on a separate layer, and then I'll put my final lines on top of it. And that will let me get things exactly where I want them to be. So from here, we are going to lock down the outside circle, select compass rose, create a new layer that I'm going to call Fleur. And Fleur, who just happens to be selected, I won't be able to do anything to any of these layers that are, even though they're unlocked, they're invisible. I can't do anything to any of those layers on accident, by purpose or on accident. While I could drag and copy a line, I'm just gonna make another quick box here and get my Bezier curve tool, handle to corner click, handle to corner click, right click to get rid of it. As it is active, I will go to my stroke paint just to show you that you can change just the color of one line. And if I hit escape, or if I click off of it, now you can see that this line is a different color from that. And so you can change the color of the active objects to give yourself some ideas in the same layer while you're working. So that can be really helpful. I'll select my square, right click and cut. Select my line, left click, and come back to my align and distribute, Shift Control A. And relative to page, I will center on the vertical axis. I'm not going to center on the horizontal axis because what I'm going to do is use these sliders to pull the line to where I want it to be. And that'll give me a nice little guideline, and I can control zoom in to see where this is and really fine tune them. And that'll give me some points to work with. If I don't click on it using the nodes, I'll show you what happens here if I go straight to my Bezier curves and straight lines. I would just handle to cusp node, left click, and drag out to where I want a line to be. Zoom in, pick my, so here's where we have to start looking ahead to where we're going to work. I'll look ahead where I want to be, what I'm calling about the halfway point of this little collar, click and drag. And if I pull this just right, it'll give me a fairly nice radius. I can either right click to finish it. Okay. I was hoping to show some of the other options. So let's do that. Click there, say that looks about right. Click and drag. The other thing I can do is it tries to generate this line. I can say, sure, that's fine. I'll put it right about there in the midpoint and enter. And that's taken. I can still come back and infinitely mess with these nodes once I have the points in place. And if I decide that something isn't as nice as I would like it, I can click on those positions, and there's a little button here that says insert new nodes into selected segments. Click on that, and now I've got one in between those two that if I click on it while those are active, it'll move all of them in relationship to one another, Control Z. If I click off and come back to it, then I will only affect that node, and this will let me move just one toggle or another. And you can see what happens here. Suddenly I can start affecting shapes and having them turn back on themselves. So that's a really helpful thing to be able to do. Control Z, and a couple more times. I can also reposition this 1 and change the toggles in such a way that I think maybe it makes a slightly nicer curve. And I can add as many or take out the nodes if I want to. I can always drag one to another, providing that it's going to snap to it. Huh. It's not wanting to snap to it. Possibly it's just a visual thing, but I can pull those in, handle to smooth node. And now I've eliminated those nodes and I can drag those back out. And that was the same thing I had before. So that's half of my collar. At this point, I think I'm going to get, oh yeah. So Control and the mouse wheel will unfortunately give a great deal of vertigo. And now my whole design is off. So I'm glad I accidentally did that, because at this point I say, holy crap, what have I done? I've ruined it all. If I go to View and Display Mode, Canvas Orientation, Reset Rotation, boom, all is forgiven, nothing is broken. So I'm glad I accidentally did that, so that you don't have to wonder, what have I done? Did I just break everything? Am I doomed? View, Canvas Orientation, Reset will correct your screen. I'm used to dealing with 3D graphics where I have to manipulate things in all axes and rotations. And so knowing where my cardinal directions are at all times is really something that I'm not comfortable with not knowing. From here, I can always go to the fill and stroke and change the stroke style back to R2. And then that will be consistent with everything else. And this is why I ended it here roughly in the half of the line, so that these would not be extending too far. Otherwise, if we move by the nodes, if I had brought this all the way down, I would have some geometry that started invading my outline and it wouldn't look right. So that's something you can always mess with to make it look like everything is seamless. I mean, there's so many things you can do with this. At this point, I'm going to go back to my Bezier curve tool, somewhere near the middle. And of course, I can always move these anytime I want. I will generally look for halfway where I want my curve to be before I click drag, because that's how it's going to generate that curve. And I can move this until I think it looks about right. And when I let go, it creates that tentative line. And then sometimes this will be a pretty good option. Otherwise, what I tend to do is just hit enter to lock it in place. Then I can go handle to custom and click another one and say that's where I want it to be. Hit enter and move around this way. This is just something that I like to do because I feel like it gets me closer to what I want with a minimal amount of going back and fine tuning everything. That said, I don't like that high spot. I don't like that high spot or that one. So I can edit by node and start pulling these in such a way that it will sweeten those curves and make them look a lot less crunchy and unpleasant. So I do have to go back to my nodes if I want this to all be one line. And I can change the stroke at any time. And so that really shows up there just how flat that is. I really don't like that. Go back to my Bezier curve tool, handle to cusp node, and it all becomes one line. And now I don't get the thin line anymore because it's all part of one object. And you'll also notice that as I move around, it changes the size of my selection, but I can always go back to selection at any time, and I can still adjust these. Control Z, Shift, that'll stretch it out in that axis. Anything that I want. If I click on the corner, click when I see this, the little move tool, you'll see that these have now changed. And so now when I grab those, it'll rotate. So that's really helpful when doing things like bird feathers or fish scales or something that you want to repeat and have slightly moved for an organic feel. If I don't want to have that, I can either left click again and that'll restore that, or click off and then it's not selected anymore. But I want to select it, go back to my nodes, just so I see them, pick up with my Bezier curve tool, and then finish up this little scroll shape here, enter. And then just because it's me, I'm going to grab that one, fill that out. And keep in mind that the guidelines are just that, they are guidelines. If you look at it and say, I like the way this looks better than what my background image is, go for it. Because honestly, and ultimately, the most important thing is going to be, what does this look like? What did the background image look like? If this looks better than my guidelines, good, do that instead. I can click on that and say that I want that to be 2, just so it's consistent. Now it has my same line thickness that I have on everything else. The last line, I'll probably pick up about at a midway point here. Zoom in. This is fiddly because I have a slight change in geometry here. And you'll notice that after you do a curved line, you'll get another curved line, but if you do 2 curved lines in a row, it will try to make it straight. So this is why I have to hit enter, because I do want to have a much different relationship between those lines. And if I update the stroke to 2, that really shows me where it's getting crunchy and squashed. And I can start adjusting it and fine tuning it to where it looks less unseemly. So at this point, we have all this goodness here. You can grab all of it. And if I don't want the green line, I can always left click on that green line and it'll unselect it. Object group, edit copy, edit paste, object flip horizontal, H, and grab it, and it will try to snap to there, and there it is. Now we have our fleur-de-lis. And then if I want to change this, now you'll notice that it doesn't quite match at the top. That is something that happens when these lines end this way, which means that the inside comes to a sharp point, but the outside doesn't. When you come back far enough, it'll kind of fool itself and trick you into not thinking that that's 2 shapes meeting up like that. If you want to fill that in, you can always change that stroke and grab just this and start filling in some of that if you want to. Stroke paint to, we want no green, 100% black. And there it is. That fills it in a little bit more if that's important to you. Otherwise, you can have a background shape that starts here, moves there, and there. Well, actually, I want to see why that didn't work. because the stroke's too slight. Right. So stroke style 2. And then when I put it in, that'll kind of cap that off pretty nicely. So that's another workaround for coming up with some sharp looking geometry, is just filling things in such a way that no one will know. So we'll unlock our flare, we'll unlock our compass rose, we'll unlock our outside circle. If we click on outside circle and then select the outside circle, now this fills in, scroll down here to where it was at less than 100, and we can either click here and type in, we can grab the slider, or if we click here and select all of that, it usually updates to 100. So now everything that's visible is here. I can grab everything visible, and I can move them all, but if I try to do something, if I want to try to do something like transform rotate and rotate them 22.5 degrees, they'll all transform independently from one another because they're not grouped. If, on the other hand, I object group them and now they're all one, and then I apply, then it will turn them all that way. That's not what I want to do though, because I want to make sure that it's still with my circle at the geographic center so that I can build all my radial symmetry. That I didn't really want to turn things around. So object group, and now they're all one. Here I can edit cut, and when I come back to my compass rose, edit paste in place, it will paste it exactly where we had moved the background image to. So we can't even see the background image. But if we lock down the compass rose and come to the background image and grab it, we can see it's still there. We've just more or less perfectly covered it with our new guidelines. Although I can see there, I don't like that. Actually, if I put the background image as invisible, I can't alter it anyway. So if I come to my compass rose, I can toggle this line and fit that to where it does a better job of not having this. I mean, this is such a minor issue, having something like that. And if I wanted to add extra nodes, I could. Add an extra node to give me just a little bit of room to massage things around and clean them up to where I think they look better. It's a really friendly tool for being able to do graphic art with, and you can get some really amazing results. At this point, I could either delete all of my invisible layers, or if I save it as it is, I will still have all of my background things, but only I will know that they're there. So from here, I'd like you to know what you can do with this. If we go to File and Save As, I had decided that I was going to call this Cartoon Compass. SVG is going to be the default setting, so I can go ahead and save that. Yeah, find replace. I can also save it as a whole host of different file designations. So from here, if I go with a That's not where I was. So I did recently upgrade my version, and the these aren't quite in alphabetical order. They're close. I'm not finding PNG. This makes me very upset because I prefer PNG. Boo hiss. What good is that? Now I'm wishing that I hadn't deleted my old copy of Inkscape because I really liked being able to, well, let's see what happens if I try to save it as .png. Is it going to be PNG, SVG? That's no good. That won't work. That's rather, I mean, I guess I could save it as a GIMP palette and then export it as a PNG, but that takes an extra step that I was hoping not to take. Fine. However, I'm guessing that that should give me, I don't see that it did it here. Okay. I've saved some as a DXF before. Then I found out that the scales come out really squirrely. The other thing is I'm used to being able to save it in such a file size that when I do, file type rather, that I at least get a little thumbnail of what it would look like. I might have to go to this, records, line art, class follow along. What is that crummy? Those things don't show me. I mean, normally I was able to get the PNGs, and it would just take these basically perfect screen captures, and it would scale them exactly as the page. So I'm rather upset by this, and I only have myself to blame. Huh. Well, now I want to find out what happens if I go to GIMP and if I can view any of those. Because if I can't view the file, I mean, I guess I can view the SVG and still export it, but that still is so aggravating to have to add a separate step. Come on. And follow along.
Grimwolf, technical question. So you said that PNG is your favorite format. I've also heard that SVG is also scalable, is a scalable format. What would be the difference between the two? Why would you choose one over the other?
So let's show all files. Aha. So the answer is that SVG, I recently was not able to use on my WordPress website because SVG can carry all kinds of malicious content with it and piggyback horrible viruses and malware and whatever all the other terrible things are. Whereas a JPEG or a PNG or a TIFF or a GIF, and I am going to say GIF, those can't necessarily send malicious code with them, but the SVG can. So, no, my workaround for that is I compress the file because I just want to share art. So I compress the PNG or the SVG, and then that becomes a .zip, and then it'll still be in SVG at the other side. So all the images that I'm showing are on my website to download in SVG so that you can directly manipulate all the nodes and have all the layers already, all that stuff as I saved it. Some of them I've compressed into one layer and some of them I've left as other layers, but you can always go back to the lines and hit ungroup, 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 and it will remember how it was built, which is pretty neat. I'm gonna, no, that's, okay. Well, it looks like R2 Compass SVG will open as a thing. And so that's showing me it's gonna be transparent. So if I file export as .png, did that export? Okay, export, minimize just in case. And that was one thing I hadn't expected because I wasn't expecting them to remove file extensions on me. So my apologies, everyone. Class follow along. Okay, so I do have a cartoon compass as a PNG. Looks just fine. Kind of aggravating to have to take a separate step to put it in another program to do that. But there you have it. GIMP is also, that is a graphics interface manipulation program, is another fine set of freeware out there, open source and all that good stuff that you can use. That maybe it's not as friendly as Photoshop, but it does all the same things. Only you don't have to pay for it. And I'll stop right there. Looks like we have another half hour of the class. Are there any questions for me? I will take it that means that there are no questions, in which case we can hide the rest of these layers and start a new layer that we will call Pelican background. Import wherever it is that you keep all of your images. And I'm going to go ahead and go with the one that I suggested that we should use. Align to distribute. I need to select a thing. Relative to page, vertical and horizontal. Lock that down and then create another layer that will be Pelican. And from here, I'll zoom in So when I have something like this that I want to start off with, I will do something like creating a circle, ellipse, and arc, Control Shift. Aha. Oh dear. So it did draw it, but so I need to make sure that that's selected. The stroke is off. So fill is off, stroke paint needs to be a color. Now we have a color. Oh, how bizarre. I do need to find out what is screwy about my circles, because there was some way that I was able to make a radius of a circle and do some really bizarre, horrible things that doesn't become a complete circle. Oh, wow, that's really, okay. There we go. Oh, that's really aggravating that now it seems like for the rest of my life, I'm going to end up with a slight gap in my circles. Oh, well, I will figure that out later. That shouldn't be happening in your instances. That was sort of an layover from my last build of Inkscape for some reason. I did something that I didn't want to do, and now I'm paying for it. But I will use some background layers like this, and I don't, go away Dropbox. Change my opacity here to where I can see what's going on. And so I'm going to change the name of this layer to Pelican BG to separate it from Pelican background. I'll call Pelican background image thing. And if I lock down that layer and create a new layer that we will just call Pelican, here's where I'll start doing things like creating some eyebrows and making them in such a way that they appear to be on top of what's behind them. So it looks like the eye is set behind an eyebrow and occupying a physical space. It will be subtle in this case, but it won't always be depending on your work. So I don't like that, 0.5. And different things will happen at different times. But you can do the same thing. Downloading any of the images that I already have, putting the images as a background, and then you can kind of trace around and basically copy, or you can have a separate layer and go over it and say, I don't like that, I want it to do this thing instead. You know, this is probably both my favorite part and the part where the part of my brain that doesn't do talking takes over, because I'm only looking at visual input, and that is a completely different part of my brain than the part that is in charge of speech. So it takes a real force of will to come up with different words that aren't what I'm having to think about, especially when I'm doing things like hotkeys. So I can't really listen to books when I'm doing this kind of work. or really talk when I'm doing this kind of work because I forget what it is that I'm doing, which also means that I am not necessarily going to remember to say what the keystrokes are. And I was hoping that this program that shows what my keystrokes are would also show my mouse strokes, but apparently it doesn't. Or maybe that was a toggle that I forgot to set, now that I think on it. We could, oh, so then the whole point of that was, then when I decide that I have as much of that as I want, I can come back here and fill in these lines, and it will end up looking like the little eye is not being overlapped. Oops. It will look like it's on a separate plane from the other objects, and it will look like it's set into a socket instead of just being a bunch of layers on top of layers, because you wouldn't have the circle filling in those little areas. And maybe I should make those a little bit more pronounced. Point five. And so again, I had the same thing where I had a circle on my background. Wow, that was exciting. Maybe that'll go away after a while. Yeah, right.
Master Grimald, I have a question.
Yes.
So you've been showing us how to use this tool using the line art underneath, but I know that you've done some things where you started with that sketch from Albrecht Dürer, but you've also done some other things that were not based on two-dimensional images. Is that correct? You've done some things that are based on like 3D objects?
So the 3D objects are a completely different thing. I use ZBrush for that. I do 3D modeling. I don't normally take my 3D models to a two-dimensional plane, although I guess I could take a screenshot of a three-dimensional object and then put it as a background in Inkscape and then cartoonize it. Is that what you were asking?
Well, I guess what I wanted to ask really was, say I had something that's like embroidery or something on an urn, and I take a screenshot of it, and I want to use Inkscape to make a two-dimensional model, to make a vector model. Are there tips that, since we only have about 15 minutes left, are there any tips that you would give me to sort of start me down the right path if I wanted to do that? Any way to set myself up for success in that hypothetical?
So there are a couple things. I want to go to my line art, and North Shield has some good ones. I should have done the back arrow. North Shield, PNGs. So, for instance, what was that one? Let's go with SVG. Okay, fine. That's the thing. And we should have, go back to the line art, one of those. So this is a musical instrument that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. because it's Welsh, I think.
Oh,
It's a coral roof, so I guess I did attempt it, but I wouldn't recommend it. So at that point, they're on the same, I just put them all on the same layer, which was silly. So if I cut and then just move that to a different layer that doesn't have, okay, a different layer called worth, edit, paste in place. From here, I lined up some things, and it's trying to lock onto some of the nodes that are underneath it. That's hidden. Oh, that was Pelican. Let's lock that down. Yeah, get rid of that.
so how do I know if the image that I'm looking at from my Google search is a good choice for my background image if I were going to attempt this? What characteristics should I look for in an image?
This question is well thought out, and I don't know that I really have an answer for you because honestly, when I'm doing things like this, generally what I'll do is I'll drop the opacity on that. Is it on Pelican? Yes, it was. I'll drop the opacity down so that I have a better idea of what I'm doing. And then I'll do all of my drawing on top. Huh. I guess this was, I thought I brought in SVG. Oh, right. This is what I was talking about. Shift Control G. Shift Control G. There we go. So now I can get to all of my little pieces and parts that I had, where I put them down. The answer is I'll just take whatever it is that I'm looking at and start drawing the outlines of it and decide what it is that I want to do. Now, in my case, I'm mostly approaching this from I want to reproduce it in metal. So for the strings, I wouldn't necessarily cut those. I would want to raise them so that they were, they had some visual depth to them instead of being a removal of material, because otherwise they wouldn't look like strings, depending on what I'm doing. The thing is that there are so many options in art. There isn't really a right or a wrong way. But what I would say is it's always important to use references. And so when I do want to make something like this, I will look for, I can pluck the strings. I will look for objects that there are physical copies of, or wood carvings somewhere, or architecture, or if there isn't an extant piece, then at least a painting of something. Import. One of these was, well, there was the Athenor. Although I thought there was yeah, this one from De Re Metallica. This is a 16th century treatise on metals and stuff. And so it had these flames. So I dropped down the opacity on them. Import. And that one is in, I think that was also in North Shield. We have one in Callantyre. Keeper. Okay. Object flip horizontal. Oh, no, it wasn't. I believe that it was originally something like that. And I did end up tracing those flames with a few changes here and there, because I decided that I wanted something, but I wanted to get the same kind of line quality and look without going out of my way to make the lines thicker or thinner because of the medium that I tend to work with. If I wanted to reproduce this woodcut, I could take those lines and drop them in such a way as to mimic the flames. And then if I come back right next to it, a little bit wider, and then go in with fill, you know, suddenly I have the thick, thin lines that I might want, and I can still change, you know, stroke style to like 0.2, and maybe that'll let them taper off a little bit. That also brings me to discussing how to fill objects, because sometimes you want a background. I don't personally in most cases, unless I'm doing like a color object of arms for a kingdom or something like that. I'm mostly looking at black and white, but it is important to know that you can change the background, and then if you want to, you can have the stroke be a different color from your background. And so, I mean, it's a really neat tool. A lot of times I will have to put the background in separately because I'll have so many different convolutions that it tries to turn the shapes inside out of each other, and so it'll fill in the wrong place. So if I start scrolling that around, see, then it starts twisting around and filling in ways that I wouldn't want it to. And so then I will have to generally create the background color as a different color, as a different object that has stroke of nothing. And so then I'll have my color, and then I'll have my outline as a separate layer. And that's how I've done all the various kingdom arms that I've done when I want there to be, and then all the lines are the lines, and then I just add color and then hide those layers. And then I only do the art once. And then I can still reuse the objects in other instances.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to let you know that TJ and I have another session to do that's going to start in about 6 minutes. So just like a 3-minute warning.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is probably as good a place as any to stop. Thanks everybody for taking the class, and looks like I did need to do a little bit better time management anyway. But I feel like we mostly finished the first object in an hour, mostly.
Yeah,
It was really good.
Yeah, it was really smooth. It was like good and linear, and having all the different colors for the different parts, a lot easier to follow. Like, where are you in the thing? Like, it was splendid. Thank you.
Well, thanks for moderating and giving me the chance to do this. And now I have some place to send people to, when they ask me, so what do you do? How do you do this? I don't know. And hopefully everyone can find something fun to do.
There is one metal artist in our kingdom who I really wished could be here today, but she had a family emergency. So when you decide to publish your link, please let me know so I can share it with her.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, Mr. Gronwell.
Bye, everybody. Good luck. Have fun. Be excellent to each other.